Welcome back to Dragon Ball Dissection. When last we left off, Goku had dropped out of his fight in the Cell games in order to pass the baton to his son, Son Gohan. Now, for a character who seems poised to take the main character role over from his father, it might seem odd that, unlike in the previous two arcs, I haven't talked in any great detail about Gohan. And that is for a very simple reason. He hasn't done anything! Okay, that isn't literally true. He rescues Yajirobe, he rescues Piccolo, he accompanies Trunks and Bulma to find the duplicate time machine, and then he holes up in a magic room for the majority of the second act. Many of the actions he takes are chosen by others, and those actions have largely kept him out of dangerous situations. Again, this is the only real fighting he's engaged in for the entire arc. It makes sense. As the story itself will purposely demonstrate in a moment, the adults sending the kid off into mortal peril while they all stand around and watch looks absurd, and not in a good way. We're all going after the dangerous cyborg to find his lab where he's made more dangerous cyborgs. But one of us needs to give the civilians and baby a ride home. Who should do that? The prepubescent child? Are you kidding? Let the three-eyed muscle man play taxi. The kid's coming with us to the lair of evil. The only time this doesn't happen is when Yamcha insists on taking Goku home rather than Gohan, but I think we all know that Toriyama's desire to get Yamcha to pull himself out of the story trumped everything else at the time. Other than that, every opportunity has been made to get Gohan out of harm's way first. In the Frieza arc, it's understandable that Gohan repeatedly finds himself in danger. He's traveled to a remote planet that was thought to be safe, with no ready method of escape or backup. Many of the other fighting characters are dead, so naturally a lot of responsibility falls to Gohan. The same can be said for the Saiyan arc. Neither of his parents is in the picture. He's been kidnapped by a demon in recovery who was forcing him to fight and is, at first, only thinking of him in utilitarian purposes. But in this arc, Gohan is surrounded by other fighters, other adults. Early Dragon Ball features slightly older kid characters in constant peril, but they don't have parents or typical child obligations. For all the jokes made, Gohan does have a comparatively orthodox home life, and in this arc both of his parents are continually present to shield him from harm. So the fact that Gohan has not had much to do so far is understandable. Unfortunately, the arc in which Gohan has had the smallest role does not very well mesh with its new priority of him taking over from Goku. Well, it doesn't mesh well in the sense that the arc does not have enough organic build-up to this moment. It certainly meshes well in the sense that Gohan is mimicking Goku's role from the last arc, being removed from the story until the last possible minute to enter into a conflict in which he has no real personal stake. As Gohan tells his father in the Room of Spirit and Time, while the latter tries to make him angry enough to become a Super Saiyan, he can't imagine Cell killing anybody he knows, because he's never seen Cell before. Goku actually has to encourage him to imagine Frieza instead, because that's the villain with whom Gohan actually does have an organic personal connection. I would not go so far as to say this completely dilutes its significance. After all, Dragon Ball in its entirety is a serialized narrative, not just within its arcs, but across the whole saga. So it would be very disingenuous to say that there has been no build-up to the idea of Gohan taking up his father's mantle, even as we see him literally discarding Piccolo's mantle. Gohan, after all, is introduced as soon as possible after Goku grows up. From nearly the time he is introduced, so is the idea that he could surpass Goku. The series has created much iconography presenting Gohan in his father's image. The Saiyan arc presents a coming-of-age story for this character, wherein he matures from a coddled, pampered scaredy cat into someone brave who will take the big risks and stand up for those who are suffering. Teaming up Gohan with Bulma and Krillin to head to Namek is very obviously reminiscent of Goku with those two characters in the Pirate Cave so long ago. While that trajectory didn't necessarily have to lead to Gohan taking over his father's role, it doesn't feel out of place either. His lack of a role in this particular arc does diminish the impact somewhat, but in the greater context of the series, it fits. Keeping the strongest guy out of the action and thus the story has become Toriyama's go-to modus operandi, which unfortunately really doesn't help make Gohan feel like he truly belongs in this story. After a bit of Gohan powering up that impresses everybody, followed by Cell kicking his butt, which is slightly less impressive, Gohan announces that this fight is pointless. Well, you'll get no arguments from me there. As we'll see in the next arc, I find characters causing danger on a planetary scale for no other reason than to satisfy their own egos to be extraordinarily pointless and frustrating. Then he says he doesn't want to kill anybody. That I find a bit dubious. Every time I get to this line, I always think about the same moment. Gohan sure never had any trouble killing these guys, and while there's never really any confirmation, it seems fairly likely they're dead. They get knocked into a body of water and are never seen to surface, so unless they can both breathe underwater, that's the end. And Gohan showed neither hesitation at the prospect nor remorse at the act. But, those guys are nameless grunts while Cell is a major character, and fiction far too often seems to value life on the basis of how high in the credits you're listed. Gohan's inhibition was his fear, and since overcoming that, he's never had any hesitation in getting involved in a fight when needed, including in this arc. I'm not claiming he's a gleeful murderer like Vegeta. Aside from those guys I just mentioned, I can't think of any other time Gohan has gone in for the kill. Cell has proven he is an unconscionable threat who not only won't stop, but because of his incessant regenerating abilities, he cannot be stopped by any other means besides being killed. So perhaps it's reasonable that Gohan would find the prospect more difficult to stomach. Or perhaps Cell is correct in thinking that Gohan is presenting this information, as well as the explanation that his power explodes when he's threatened, as an attempt to intimidate Cell. If that is the case, it backfires, as it further motivates Cell to see what this power is all about. So he decides to torture Gohan to make it happen. Now comes the chewy, nougaty center to the conflict. Piccolo has decided to confront Goku over setting up a scenario where a bunch of adults stand around watching a kid get tortured. And when the Demon King is telling you lack empathy, it's usually worth listening to. He tells Goku that Gohan isn't a fighter like Goku is, he doesn't relish the idea of facing strong opponents. And he questions whether Goku even prepared Gohan by telling him of his plan. Because Piccolo has never ignored Gohan's protestations that he doesn't want to be a fighter, while putting him into a dangerous situation that will either draw out his latent power or kill him. Never! All joking aside, it's a poignant demonstration that Piccolo understands Goku's son better than he does. After all, the kid down there, when given a choice, has consistently patterned his wardrobe after his big green kidnapper instead of his own dad. And yes, Goku's wink and a nudge, don't worry about the tournament reactions to his son's worries, as if he was holding back the ultimate surprise party, shows just how uniquely skewed Goku's priorities are. He really should have told Gohan about this. However, it's a very human mistake to make, to conflate one's own interests with someone else's, especially one's kid. And, to his credit, it's a mistake that Goku immediately recognizes upon being told. Quite frankly, I'm sick of the overplayed, Goku's a terrible dad who doesn't care about his son jokes, especially when they're coupled with, lols, Vegeta treats his son better. This is treating your kid better? This is treating your kid better? Given how Gohan has been portrayed for the 26 years following this event, it's easy to see how Goku is wrong, and that this is not the path that works best for Gohan. However, while Gohan not being as suited for fighting as Goku is not an idea entirely out of left field, it is a concept so buried as to be a surprise. The same narrative threads that led us to this moment of Gohan acceding his father in this manner are the same narrative threads that would lead us to believe he's ready for it. Again, what was Gohan's character arc? It was developing from timid, bookish, and coddled into an independent warrior and adventurer. If either of his parents was shown as pushing him in a certain direction, it was his mother, not his father. It's always been Chi-Chi Gohan has had to assert himself against and defy. In The World's Strongest Guy, Gohan's musical number illustrates his conflict between his mother's wishes and what he wants, which is to follow in Piccolo's footsteps. In The Ultimate Decisive Battle for Earth, it's Goku who is attuned to what his son wants, while Chi-Chi is not willing to. And in the TV version of this arc, there are multiple examples of Gohan ducking out on his studying in order to focus on more Goku-centric tasks or wishes. I'm not using those as counterexamples, as they're not part of this continuity, But like the filler representations of Bluma's and Yamcha's relationship, it's a good indicator of what seems readily apparent in that moment. But unlike the manga's complete 180 with that relationship, this doesn't seem contradictory either, because there's always that little voice saying he wants to be a scholar. And while that too seems to be due to his mother's coaching, it's still something he agrees to here. Goku is aware of it. He even dangles it in front of Gohan's face, just like Piccolo had. Save the world, then you can be a scholar! As I hope I've already made clear, I'm not at all saying that this turn of events flies in the face of all prior established evidence. Rather, it indicates how natural it is for Goku to have missed this fact, because it's one that's so easy for us to overlook as well, which is what makes this moment work. In this moment, he has become just like Chi-Chi. Gohan does like to study and learn. He also likes to fight and have adventures. While those traits have been cultivated by his various influences, neither of those sides of him appear to be wholly imposed on him. He's simply not as singular-minded or extremely devoted as either of his parents would like him to be. But before Goku can get back into the fight, Cell changes his tactic and decides that if torturing Gohan won't work, then torturing the others might be more effective. And yeah, there is plenty of precedent for that. Cell snags the bag of Senzu and then creates 7 Cell Juniors. Huh. Well, that's certainly something he can do. Wow. This might be the first original power we've ever seen him use. Oh, what am I saying? That's probably considered close enough to be yet another Piccolo move. Personally, the demeanor of the creatures and the manner and motive of their creation calls to my mind the Saibai-men. So I find it amusing that Vegeta is now on the other side of this game. I've heard many a fuss over Gohan impotently standing around while his friends and family are being beaten to bloody pulps. The real Gohan would do everything in his power to fight back, even if he knew it wasn't enough. He only tries once and gets swatted away. This is artificial conflict and a contradiction of Gohan's established character. Now, as you've already seen, I'll go that far in regards to the quote-unquote pacifism from earlier. However, this I can totally understand. Gohan has always been at his best when he's in the moment, acting spontaneously. He unleashes his deepest power when it's natural for him to do so. He doesn't think about it, he simply acts, he simply reacts. That's not to say he's incapable of fighting when he's not in a blind rage, but right now, he's pushed out onto a stage and told to perform. Get mad, Gohan, or we're all going to die! Show your true power, Gohan, or I'm going to kill all your friends. That's not organic. That's a huge amount of pressure. That's an enormous emotional burden. What could be brought to the surface easily under different circumstances is now being blocked by this paralyzing fear of not doing it properly. It's the same way we can get into a zone and master a video game or play a complicated piece of music until the moment we start thinking about what we're doing, and then we immediately lose the ability to do it. It also demonstrates the difference between Goku and Gohan. Goku is so attuned to fighting that he can consciously flip a switch between friendly competition and battle to protect his life. Gohan can't do that. That's why I think number 16's head making speeches to Gohan is completely pointless. Oh yeah, number 16 tried to stop Cell earlier, but it turns out Bluma and her dad took out the bomb in his body, so Cell blows everything up but his head. It's really not that important. Goku already told him all this stuff, and it didn't work then, so some stupid robot he's never met before telling him the same crap isn't going to make any difference. I think Cell even knows that an appeal to reason is not going to do the trick, and so does the one thing to elicit a visceral reaction by crushing number 16's head, which is what finally causes Gohan to snap. And on the surface level, that works. That is cruel, like Dodoria killing the Namekians. But it's hampered by Gohan's lack of role in this story. He's never met this character before. It's also hampered by number 16's lack of role in this story. What has he done? Who cares about him? I'm sorry, he seems like a nice guy, but he's pretty much dead weight for most of this story. In fact, he's so expendable, I'm convinced that's the only reason he's put in this role. He can be removed without affecting anything, and he's the only character who can die who seemingly can't be brought back to life. But that's not the kind of sacrifice that generates any emotional weight. What happened to all of that gloom and doom prophesying Dr. Gero was doing? What was all that about? Okay, he's marginally stronger than number 17, big whoop. He doesn't exactly live up to any hype here when the only lasting impact he has on anything is dying. But, we'll get deeper into that at the end. Gohan is powered up and moved all the way from I don't want to kill anybody to I want to kill everybody. He brutally dismembers the Cell Juniors. He absolutely toys with Cell. If we're talking about Super Saiyan existing as a warrior of rage, Gohan here embodies that much more than Goku did in the Frieza arc. But it gets to the point that even Goku is telling Gohan to be more pragmatic and finish the fight before Cell gets desperate. But Gohan is in full bloodlust mode, determined to make Cell suffer more. And somehow a kick hard enough to shatter Cell's skull is also enough to make him vomit number 18 up whole, reverting him to his second form. And that makes him desperate enough to, as I said before, refuse to lose, and just blow everything up including himself. I suppose that's another interesting power. He has a self-destruct like his artificial human brethren. Once he's activated it, he can't stop it. It's on a timer, but if someone attacks him, he explodes immediately. And it also makes him swell up like a grotesque balloon. I wonder if number 16 and number 18 would be the same way. That just seems like a very plot-specific bomb mechanism to me. With all these arbitrary stipulations in place, Goku realizes there's nothing else he can do. After a heartfelt apology and goodbye, Goku places a hand on Cell and teleports out of harm's way, sacrificing himself in the process. And in a case of mood whiplash so extreme it could only come from the pen of Toriyama Akira, you turn the page for a whole lot of comedic mugging before Cell blows up, taking Goku, Kaio, and Bubbles with him. Now that the threat of Cell has seemingly been vanquished, and we're well into 1993, it's the perfect time for Toei to put out a new movie. Whose power is maximum? Is it yours? Is it yours? That's right, next time we take a look at the 8th Dragon Ball Z movie. Burn Up, Hot Fight, Fierce Fight, Super Violent Fight. What a whimsical title.